Once 2020 happened, we had COVID, we had the summer of BLM, we had the murder of George Floyd. I felt like a lot of people were just scared to even investigate what forgiveness in a racial context would look like. My name is Kimberly Katiti, aka Kimi Katiti. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, a musician, and painter. I'm based in North Hollywood, California, and I've recently been just speaking about some alternative views on Black identity and Black freedom and free Black thinking.
Yeah, so we actually live just right up the street from one another. I mean, not up the street. I think it was like an hour and a half when I walked to your place the other day. But the first thing I was struck by when I walked into your apartment was all the visual art that's around. You mentioned already that you paint, and what people might not see when they walk in, but something that I know about you is your musical side. So because this is kind of a music themed, not strictly music themed, but music focused segment, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got your start musically? I know not all of that took place in America. You have kind of an interesting backstory there, and just dig into your roots a little bit.
Yeah, my family has always been pretty artistic, especially like with visual art. I'm the last of 4 siblings. Under my mom and dad. I don't know what you call it, children. So I'm kind of the last born, and I would follow everything they did. And my elder brother, Quincy, he had a season where he was into audio production and started creating beats on like Fruit Loops. And this was when I was around 12, living in Tanzania. And I just started, following what he did, and then started writing some poetry of my own, and then that evolved in high school into something more like rap, just like conscious hip hop. And a lot of these like high school boys would like always stop me and be like, "Hey, can you rap for us?" Because I guess I was improving, and they're like, "Wow, there's this girl who raps." So by the time I was done with high school, around 18 years old, I worked with my brother, collaborated. He made the beat, and I kind of provided lyrics, and made a couple songs, and one of them like went to #1 in Kenya on a gospel radio chart. And I did another collaboration just a few months after, just like putting my lyricism onto music, and that went to #1. The song was called Battle Cry. It went to #1 in Uganda. That was like just a quick thrust into like the music industry there, and I did a few shows and just met amazing people that gave me opportunities, and that kind of pushed me into learning audio production. That's what I studied when I moved to the United States in 2013. So now I hold a bachelor's in audio production and have since kind of been making music here and there, and still kind of just love writing and lyricism.
Yeah. So all of that was independent, Kimi?
Yes, all of that was independent.
And were you funding your projects yourself? I know that's like
Yes.
a big, yeah, wow.
I mean, I was working with my brother, so that's one huge kind of production expense that's
so true. Yeah.
Kind of was out of the picture. And I did have a lot of people who were gracious enough to kind of do free collaborations and like recording opportunities. One of my friends, Joseph Tumwinje, helped me out with like the recording of Battle Cry, and just so many gracious people. So yeah, self-funded in a way, but also just opportunities and open doors.
Yeah, I think some of those opportunities are, I'm not belittling those accomplishments whatsoever, because that's amazing and so cool. But I think back to being 18 or 17 or 16 and how much easier it was to find free opportunities back then.
Yeah.
Not because it was a different time necessarily, although yes, it was, but because people are really more eager to invest freely into somebody who's like a kid, or they perceive to be a kid. Because it's like, oh, well, you don't really have a job yet. Like you're just still in high school, or you have nothing really to your name that you could pay me with. So I won't even expect that of you. And the whole etiquette is different for young musicians.
Yeah.
And I think if I had known that myself as a younger musician, I might have taken more advantage of it. I don't have like regrets per se, but I think that's just so amazing that you were able to seize on that really like critical, interesting time as a kid, basically, and go to #1 in Kenya. And then the other one went #1 in what, Uganda, was it?
Uganda, yeah.
Uganda. That's so incredible. So what were the musical influences in your ear at that time? You said that, you mentioned that you were making slow improvements little by little. Who were you listening to get those improvements, and how would you describe that sound?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was listening to Talib, Kweli a lot when I was in high school. So a lot of like hard rap, like people who are very deep in their lyricism and kind of have intricate flows. I was listening to that a lot and was really influenced by that, like Mos Def, Common. And then, that was in that season of like slam poetry in high school and sort of writing poetry that evolved into more rap lyricism. And then when I was around 18 and kind of had those songs that went to #1, I was listening to a lot of Christian hip hop. So like Lecrae, Andy Mineo, those sorts of artists. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
I actually met Andy Mineo once.
Oh, that's awesome.
He was at some Christian conference, and I think maybe it wasn't IHOP. It was the one thing conference.
The One Thing conference.
I could be making this whole thing up, but I know that I was in the same room as Andy Mineo.
That's so sick. Yeah, those were like my two main influences around the time, and pretty much the whole Reach Records like roster. So the music I was kind of creating and writing was more Christian and like kind of gospel, but it had a reggaeton and dancehall appeal to it. So the music got played in like clubs and like nightclubs. So
oh my gosh, that's so cool. It's like almost subversive. I know as somebody who has some kind of faith influence in some of my work, I love the idea that people are like taking in some of that stuff without even knowing it, and they still resonate with it, even if it's not a worldview that they necessarily share. There's something there that they do literally dance to inside, or literally. That's so cool. So then how have you been spending these last several years since you moved to the United States? I know that have you been in LA that whole time since 2013? Okay. So we moved here around the same time, and I know for myself there's like a lot of ups and downs music career wise during that period, and some phases of like not doing so much and some phases of doing a lot. What does that look like for you since you've come to the States?
Yeah, I relate to that a lot. I've definitely had seasons of like doing, like putting my effort, like all and everything into music, and then kind of getting tired and taking a long break and then getting back into it. It's been almost 9 years now since I moved here, and I'd say the first sort of 4 years I was in college and learning a lot about music and how to write, how to produce, how to kind of engineer and work my way around a recording studio. So that was a very intense season. But once I came out of that, I was more behind the scenes in the music industry and sort of paid attention to more of the social and business aspects of it all. And haven't really put that much energy into my own music. I released a single last year and an EP in 2020. But yeah, that's been it so far.
Yeah, that's not too distant in the past.
Yeah.
I haven't released anything with more than 3 songs on it since 2014. And I feel the guilt for it every day. So I feel like you've been still like staying warm at least. And the work that you've put out has just been fabulous. Like I'll text you at like 9 p.m. like, Kimmy, I'm listening to your stuff again. It's so good.
Thank you.
It really does move me. So then what was your impetus for shifting into, as you say, talking about particular issues? I know you have a YouTube channel that's seen a fair amount of success in the last couple of years. When was the moment where you decided, okay, I'm gonna say my piece on the internet, and who's gonna listen? I don't know, but I'm just gonna do it.
Like what got me into that? I've been making like YouTube videos for 10 years now. Actually started off with posting like little rap verses on there, like from 2012. And since then it evolved. I kind of took a break, put some more stuff out in 2015. And then it wasn't until like 2019 when I got back into skateboarding that I fell into a kind of groove of documenting the skateboarding scene in LA, especially girls/queer skateboarding in LA, and kind of documenting that and taking note of safe spaces and skate parks where, you know, what is the vibe like? Are people aggressive here? Are people passive aggressive? Are they microaggressive? I don't know if that's a term, but you know, that sort of documentation to make sure that sort of my peers in the marginalized categories would feel safe. And through that journey, which is it's all on the same YouTube channel, that's how I kind of realized in that aspect in the skateboarding world, but also in other areas of my life, that this one track narrative on race, and even sexuality, but in some aspects, but mostly on race, it's not just a blanket on the whole experience of Black individuals. Like the whole oppressor oppressed narrative, there is more to it. And having kind of gone into these scary spaces where I expect like aggression, I realized like it's kind of down to individual interactions. Like not every white man is out to get you or like hates you or anything like that. There are a number of factors that play into the type of like racial or racist interactions one might have as like a Black individual. And so once 2020 happened, we had COVID, we had the summer of BLM, we had the murder of George Floyd. All of those things they started bubbling up in a more intense way inside of my head, inside of my heart. I felt like the topic of forgiveness was completely lost in the American discussion around race. I remember kind of posting a story, I think, after George Floyd had been murdered, and you know, people were kind of digesting and trying to understand what happened. And I was like, please look into the life of Nelson Mandela as we try to go and navigate racial reconciliation. And I just remember people kind of like, I don't know who Mandela is. I don't really know what he did. Like, you know, that's sort of, he's a name that rings a bell, but I don't know what he did. I don't know who that is. And that was like an exclamation point in my head, like, whoa, Americans, especially young Americans, don't know about Nelson Mandela. They don't know about like Desmond Tutu. And so we're trying to have this talk about racial reconciliation, but people think forgiveness is this foreign, you know, someone said Reaganist colorblind optimism to describe the stuff I talk about, but they think it's falling into that, you know, naive category where you think racism is a soft thing that you can just easily brush off. And that sort of just frustrated me. And so now I return to my YouTube channel as sort of an outlet of my opinions on this thing. And I think a lot of people resonated with the opinion videos more than, you know, the little rap snippets in the beginning or the skateboarding documentation. It was once I started speaking my mind on this issue that a lot of attention kind of came to the channel. And I've just been sharing, you know, opinions in that vein ever since April of 2021.
I know a lot of people have appreciated the videos that you've posted. Do you feel like that came naturally to you? Or did you have any reservations or fears or educated concerns maybe going into that endeavor?
Yeah, I had a lot of fear. I won't lie. Like I invited people to a Zoom call in September of 2020. That was
just
when
people,
I believe
like randos on the internet or your Instagram
friends,
followers?
close friends, pretty much, like people who I've like anyone that I've worked with or just friends that I've met. I, you know, sent out this link. I'm like, I really want us to talk about the specifically was titled "The Effectiveness of Forgiveness," and I felt like a lot of people, some people attended, and it was such a great Zoom call. But I felt like a lot of people were just scared to even investigate what forgiveness in a racial context would look like. It's like, I don't want to be associated with that. Like, I don't want to look like I'm trivializing racial trauma. So that, because people couldn't even like, you know, want to dive into that in private, a few months passed. I mean, September 2020 to April, that's like 8 months, right? So I just sat with a lot of that inside of me, like afraid to let my colors show, but it just intensified too much to the point that I just felt, I was even feeling a little bit sick at times. I had this weird season of like intense headaches. I'm like, I just have to, have to kind of get out with this, and it has to be put out where everyone can kind of like see it if they want to. And that YouTube was just the perfect outlet for me at the time.
Yeah. I know you had brought up some of these concerns in a church setting. I listened to your appearance on Benjamin Boyce's podcast, and in there you shared about this workshop that the church had been putting on. I don't know if workshop is the right word, but a space where you expected the word forgiveness to have a totally different tenor and be something that's more familiar and comfortable. I don't know if that's the word for people, and that wasn't the reception. Do you want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of going back to the George Floyd season. This was like summer of 2020, around, what was it? When did this all happen? End of May / the beginning of June. Our church, like, bless everyone's heart, they do try to, accommodate discussions over hard topics in a grace-filled manner. Like, the church is all about grace. And I still go there for that very reason. I feel like if it wasn't for their teaching, I wouldn't even be so swift to run to forgiveness. But anyway, they were hosting nightly Zoom sessions where church members could come in and just talk about race, but the focus was racial reconciliation, right? But I felt like after a few nights of this, we had just been talking about like letting people vent, and everyone was angry, and everyone was just like bringing back to their memory all these incidents of like racial hate, and where they felt slighted, where they felt othered because like they were the only Black kid in like a Seattle like white, straight male setting. And I felt like, okay, I'm waiting for the turn where we begin to talk about reconciliation. So one night, I'm attending one of these Zoom calls, and they split the group up into breakout rooms of Black people and white people. And I think this was, again, it was out of innocence, but I think this was sort of a mistake to assume that all Black individuals are going to just kind of have this one accord of thinking and just have this, one mode of like approaching race, and we're all just going to get together and grieve together, and it's just going to be the same thing because we all live through the same experience, which is that we're oppressed. And I remember just being in this Zoom call, and everyone was just really sad, and it had been some days since we started this reconciliation, and no one was bringing up the healing aspect of things. And so I decided to say like, hey guys, are we ready to entertain forgiveness, or something to that effect? And there was like a silent 1 minute where people just like looked at the screen. Like there's like 9 people just staring, and kind of like this awkward silence of like, who's gonna unmute first? And then one of the leaders in the church, honestly, like it was really shocking to me. He unmuted and he was like, I can't forgive. And he was really angry. He's like, I can't forgive. And then there was another like 1 minute of awkward silence. And then people kind of began to bring in their like, okay, Kimi, you haven't experienced racism. Like you can't really, you can't bring up the whole forgiveness thing because it's like, again, you're trivializing the weight of racism. And that's when I was kind of like, wait. Like, no, I'm Black. I'm Black. I've lived in South Africa for 7 years. So I definitely have experienced like really intense racism. And just the whole like patronizing attitude they had towards me, just even suggesting that, mind you, it's a church setting, really woke me up to like, whoa, like this word is like forbidden when it comes to talking about race in this country. Like, why is that? And so, yeah, just kind of went down that path of trying to promote forgiveness ever since that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not a soft forgiveness the way I digest it when I hear you talk about it. I do, even in what you were just saying, I see you acknowledging like, oh, yes, we should present our pain and we should be venting. There's a time and a place to vent, but the question, what next, seems like it's really relevant for you. So I wonder what that means for you. I mean, when you think about what's next in America's journey toward racial reconciliation now? If you were to write a prescription for that, drawing from your own experiences in South Africa and your own admiration for Desmond Tutu and for Nelson Mandela, what do you see as a way forward?
Yeah, I take what the people who have the better experience in the more tense situations like Desmond Tutu, I look at what they went through, which is fighting for freedom from the apartheid regime for almost 4 decades. And what they prescribe after doing all of that. Like when they raised their fists, like the stakes were higher. Like it was life or death. It was imprisonment for 27 years for Nelson Mandela for trying to just fight for freedom for his people. And what do they tell us to do coming out of all of that? Well, Desmond Tutu, he wrote a book called There's No Future Without Forgiveness. He puts it in the title. It's so important for him that we embrace this whole idea of forgiveness, even as it relates to race, pertains to race. Nelson Mandela fought to kind of reconcile Black and white together. But again, this was in a time where racism was way more ripe and real, like real laws were enforced. Like there was real segregation, pretty much like Jim Crow here in the States. And so when you look at our current racial climate in America, we're not, like, it's not really a matter of life or death to the degree that, we're fighting for freedom. There might be another discussion when it comes to police brutality, but in everyday like interactions, the level of racism we're fighting is nowhere near what they fought, and yet they still had the call to love and forgive that was stronger on their heart despite everything they fought and went through. So how much more should we be quick to get to that? And I think a lot of the anti-racist dialogue that we have today just focuses on using that anger for political ends. And I think we need to just kind of be conscious of that fact, that it just seems like liberalism is sort of the target, and dismantling that is sort of the target of all these anti-racist efforts. But ask yourself, like, do you really have peace when you spend your time trying to discriminate against, white cis folks in order to bring justice? Like, do you sleep at night? Are you have mental peace? Are you better? And if that's not the case, then maybe it's time to entertain other practices of healing, like forgiving and, being less, giving more grace and less swift to judge and condemn. That's been the case for me. I think I've experienced a lot of peace since I embraced forgiveness. And I think Americans now need to kind of give that a shot. I don't think we've reached that place 100% yet.
Are these ideas things that listeners would be able to hear in your work, your visual art, let's say, or your musical art?
I think you will find at this time, a lot of my art still revolves around skateboarding and
that's valid. Skateboarding, forgiveness.
I mean, I haven't really ever since I started putting out YouTube videos and speaking my mind, I have not really created new art save for one piece. So you're kind of going to find my 2019 work.
Sure. Yeah.
Still up on my website.
Yeah, there's always a lag.
Yeah.
There's always such a lag.
Yeah. I find that it's just been easier for me to speak directly into the camera, but I don't know really how to reflect these ideas in art just yet. That's going to be maybe a project coming up, my next sort of mission. But yeah, it's mostly going to be my celebration of diverse identities in skateboarding, which is something that I am passionate about. I think once someone speaks against this new wave of diversity, equity, and inclusion, people assume that you're against diversity, you're endorsing segregation, which it couldn't be further from the truth. There's a friend of mine, Colin Wright, who created this video for this organization Fair, and he says that he couldn't get aboard with DEI and kind of signing this DEI statement because he had to affirm racial affinity groups, and he just couldn't do that. Like, it didn't sit right in his conscience to like get aboard with that, which is like modern day segregation. So when people oppose DEI, I feel like it's more from an authentic, like, I genuinely want true diversity. of, you know, representation and diversity of thought. So that's what you'll find in my art, is a celebration of diversity in skateboarding, but I haven't lost that. It will continue to come through, whether that's fighting for a better way to approach diversity.
I love that, Kimi.
Thanks.
What is your approach? Like, if you, okay, so first of all, I will say, as a listener, I've detected some of these themes even in your music, from before these thoughts were really distilled the way that they are today. I definitely see an emphasis on forgiveness, on being a victor. I can't name other themes off the top of my head, but it's definitely the same Kimi. When I listen to your music, it's the same Kimi that I see before me today, even though you hadn't evolved to exactly the point you are ideologically yet. But let's say that you were going to put together an EP or some music work that would address some of these issues. Do you have an idea of what your approach would be? Because there's so much, like, I don't want to call it anti-woke art, because that's not what you would be, but there's so much like counter woke art that I've seen that's just been really kind of hokey and tacky and like beating you over the head with just like a list of things that they want or think that are bad, and you're supposed to be like, yeah, this is great music because I agree with it, but it's not really great music in any other meaningful sense. So that's kind of like, maybe that's my personal bone to pick with certain musicians out there, but how would you approach it if you're going to tackle that?
I mean, like, even as you were saying that, I do feel like there is this sort of John the Baptist arc of there's some people who are sort of forerunners in a genre that hasn't been dealt with before, and it's like there's no better way to sort of crack that like first attempt than to just be bold. And so I feel like those artists, they do have their place, and they kind of help open up people's minds, like, okay, you know, I think I know who you're talking about, but I don't want to say their name. But like, I think it helps to sort of allow people to have a broader, you know, like acceptance of different styles of music that are about to come in. And so you're kind of seeing this John the Baptist thing. It's like this forerunner situation.
I love that. You just opened my mind. You just opened my mind. Thank
you. Okay, great. I'm glad. But yeah, I really wouldn't make I find it hard for, you know, myself to like make music just bashing like everything that I don't believe in. That's probably why I've had this lull of like not really putting any like anti-woke music out. The last song that I released was called Pain, just about my personal just frustrations with pain. But I think I would do something that's more empowering, maybe revolving around like, as a Black girl, just like loving everything I am and the possibilities that are present for me in the world, and hopefully other girls who find themselves like in marginalized, you know, categories, however you want to define that, Black or African, living in like a third world country. Maybe it doesn't have to be Africa, it could just be in any place where economically there are not many opportunities, like to still find ways to instill hope in those young girls. I think that would be my next kind of musical chapter.
Oh, I'm so excited for it. Yay. And I'll be your accountability buddy if you need somebody to be like, Kimi, you working on it? You working on that stuff? Jeez, so what, more broadly, like kind of zooming out, do you feel like it's artists' responsibility, that's the word that I hear a lot, to quote unquote talk about these issues or be involved in some kind of big cultural conversation? Or do you feel like it's valid for an artist to totally opt out of a dialogue that the culture around them cares a lot about? Where do you stand on that? Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. I definitely I think every art, especially if you do kind of relate to the heterodox view, especially race or, you know, gender identity, I think it's important to insert your voice, even if it's in a subtle way, because the art world, like let's say painting, for example, is saturated with this this race essentialist version of Blackness. And there's this sort of like artistic fad where everyone just kind of talks about their struggle. I mean, by everyone, I mean people who are like Black painters doing Black portraiture. There's this narrative of this is my struggle, and like, you know, I'm this Black person fighting against the system. And I feel like it's so, it's becoming oversaturated, and eventually people are going to want to, they're either going to get this like mental idea of Black people always being the victim in every scenario and every, phase of life, or how about we introduce more empowered narratives into the visual like painting world? That might be the sort of like, controversial spark that introduces a new genre. I think it's absolutely important, especially when it comes to music. I love Coleman Hughes just recently released a music video for his song Blasphemy.
Yeah,
and I think that's
I saw it.
an exciting venture into a new space of just like Black individuality and free Black thinking. And I'm excited for his journey, but I think more people need to follow that lead. Otherwise, we're going to have this one vision of like Black people are these pitiful creatures because of the art that currently is out there.
You mentioned how the art space is currently saturated with a certain point of view on any number of things. And I wonder why you think that is. Why do you think artists tend to lean that way? I mean, I know in art school, those were the people that I was surrounded by, and the music community in LA, certainly those are my peers as well. And I love them dearly. It's not a matter of that. But why do you think that there is kind of counterintuitively some uniformity of perspective in this group of people that's supposed to be like the counterculture, the forerunners, as you say, like the divergent thinkers of our society?
Well, Alma, I feel like this might kind of go into tea, and it might not everyone might agree, but I'm gonna say it. I feel like just in the painting world, to be specific, there's sort of this appeal to guilt for like the elites who, purchase and display and exhibit a lot of this art. And you might not have success if you don't really display your suffering. So we do live in a system where being oppressed and being marginalized is merited more. And I think that's why there's such a heavy like demand for artists that appeal to that. And it's still novel. Like we just are hot off of like 2020 and everything that happened with BLM. So it's still very new. And these art buyers, or at least these elites, sort of want to, relieve some guilt for being these rich white people with generations of wealth. So I think that's kind of what's happening right now with that particular fad and that niche. But yeah, that's just kind of my observant like what I've gleaned from what I've seen.
I've never thought about it that way. That makes so much sense. In the visual art world, I feel like that makes some sense.
Right.
You always want to seem like the enlightened rich person who's not like one of those like
exactly
rich people. But that leaves open for me still the question about music, because music is kind of like the everyman's art. I mean, who doesn't have access on Spotify? I mean, not that there aren't people, like I don't have a Spotify subscription, but who doesn't have access to YouTube and like these hubs where we get our pop culture? Who doesn't have access to radio? Those are like the common man's media. And I don't, it's not that I think none of that same dynamic could be at play, but do you have thoughts on that as it pertains to music? Because it does kind of seem like a different animal.
Yeah, it seems like a whole different thing, because in the painting world, you do need clientele that has a lot of wealth. And so I think that drives that a lot deeper. However, when it comes to music, like you said, everyone listens to it. The whole like the way you distribute the work, and it's a different process. Like
it's not $1,000 per song.
Exactly.
The way it would be $1,000 per painting. Yeah.
Exactly. We have just like individuals with their Spotify subscriptions. So I feel like it's better to begin to maybe have more heterodox views in music. It's easier that way. Just because there's a huge group of people that just already don't agree with the narrative of things. And but yeah, when it comes to visual painting, I just think it's gonna take some time, because it's gonna take a while for those elites. And I say elites like art elites, not like Bill Gates or anything. I'm just talking
You're
about
right.
yeah, like no,
Lest
not
we like go into some rant about globalism or something strange. Like that's not what we're doing here.
No, not that. I mean, like, you know, like the Guggenheims and like those like artsy.
Yeah, it's a particular kind of person that buys a $1,000 to $10,000 painting.
Exactly.
You know, that's not you and me.
Yeah.
Right there.
And you still want to look good. You want to represent this, what's acceptable to the culture at the time. You don't want to purchase anything that, you know, will make you look like a COON. Sorry to the listeners who don't want to listen to racial slurs, but you don't want to look like you are trivializing the Black struggle. I think that's kind of what's driving that. However, people should be encouraged about music, because I do think like Coleman Hughes' video just broke 100K plays on YouTube. I mean, that's a good indication that there is an audience and there is a demand for that when it comes to just like the middle class America.
Yeah, the video production on that song was just impeccable.
It was great,
wasn't it? I bet as a visual person, you were like,
It was very satisfying.
What stood out to you about the video? What was your favorite part?
I really loved the two Colemans, because there's the, you know, there's the other Coleman is the sort of person that's against free Black thought and doesn't really like Coleman thinking for himself. And I just find that was very amusing to me. So I loved the way he played with that, and the storytelling from beginning to end was thick and rich.
Yeah, the storytelling was really profound.
Yeah,
there's a lot of imagery from that video. It really shows the power of music videos, honestly, to break through in ways that songs themselves can't always do, because it's just like burned in your visual field. The imagery of like like a rat being stomped on by someone's stiletto. Like I don't know the symbolism of that, but I want to ask him about it. I want to get him on here and ask him myself.
Yeah,
because it's so like disgusting and vivid. And then the gun, like the bullet coming out of somebody's finger. Everybody needs to go watch this video. You may or may not agree. I mean, maybe you'll agree with one of the Colemans, but not the other Coleman.
Right. Like, there's many Colemans
too. Yeah, and I was so struck by that too. I liked the two of them together there, and they were so differently executed vocally.
Yes.
That like I actually thought it was a feature. I was like, wait, I like checked like, oh, is there another featured rapper on this? Because it sounds like a different person. Like the tone was so like different in that second Coleman. But I'm glad that you mentioned that. Yeah, it was a really good video. And I think that we should try to get him on the Brave Angels podcast.
Yes, please.
So like speaking of specific songs like Coleman, I'm wondering if you could walk us through some of your own works. I mean, I know nothing has been like super current, and this won't be music produced by the same Kimi that sits before us today with her YouTube channel and with her like evolution of beliefs. But I love your song Pain, and I wonder if you would tell the story behind that.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. Pain was really fun to create. I wrote a demo for it maybe like 2019, and I have that demo up on Spotify if anyone wants to listen to the demo before the produced final version. But I was just frustrated with life here in LA, and just like the minor setbacks that, you know, accumulate over time and just begin to become this like depressive thing that you wear around. You know, just like I don't have a car in LA, and so I take a lot of public transport, and just the annoying nature of it is so frustrating.
This is the first time I've heard you say that. You normally have a really good attitude about it, because I'm right there with you. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have a good attitude about the money saving aspect of it, and just kind of not having the stress of dealing with like car repair issues or that thing.
Yes.
I mean, I had a car in 2016 and it got totaled. Like it was a really annoying, like
I didn't know that.
Situation.
Oh, that's
someone
really
like it got totaled and someone almost died, the person who was driving it. And so, you know, at least for the time being, I've saved on all of those headaches, but it's also got its big, like just annoying parts about it. Like it takes you 3 hours to get to like the west side or like beyond Culver City. And so Pain was just really about all the minutia of like day-to-day life and how it can how it can cloud your perspective into thinking that you're really just this like parasite on the planet. But then remembering, you know, at the pre-chorus is sort of my mom reminding me that sometimes, you know, gray clouds make for the best photography, like the best photos. And if you look at things differently, like that will enable you to power through the tough days. And so it's an acknowledgement that it's okay to not be okay. But also, you know, that's not the end of it. There's always hope at the end of it all.
I love that.
Thanks.
Do you have anything to say about your song Fixer? Because that's another one that I've been listening to lately. And then that it stood out to me. Maybe I should ask about album art too. Because the album art for that one is different. You used a photo and it's so effective. Oh my gosh. Like I could tell you're somebody who pays attention to what you're doing, because it's like a car. Maybe you could describe it as well, but there's like a car on the front. And when you think of a fixer with a car, you think of like a fixer upper. And so I don't know if there's some kind of allusion there that you were making, but that's another one that I was really wondering about.
Yeah. So the car, fun fact, the car is actually my neighbor's old Mercedes Benz turned into an art project. His name is Sasso the Cat. So on Instagram, if you search up Sasso the Cat, he paints a lot of cars and allows people to drive around in them or take photos with them, goes around the country. So he let me kind of take some photos with it. And so that's the cover art. And so I use that imagery to describe the vehicle in the song. So the cover art is reminiscent of like this car that I'm talking about in the song Fixer. And the passenger is trying to make it through this like ice cold, just dead landscape. And pretty much God allowing that person to stay in place because they can't move, they can't go forward. But not because he's saying no to them or to me as the person writing the song, but because he has a better plan and he kind of wants you to stay home, and he wants you to rest because there's something more there than just simply driving out and like going out and, you know, moving, having momentum, being busy, being stressed out, hurrying. So that's sort of the heart of the song, if that makes sense.
That reminds me of the Sabbath so much.
Yes.
Oh yeah, my gosh.
It's pretty much.
What is your relationship to the Sabbath? I take pretty rigorous Saturdays off. In fact, I think last Saturday was when I was at your house delivering cookies to you.
Yes. Thank you for that, by the way.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed them. What is your relationship to the Sabbath?
I mean, I love my church. I will say that first of all, like, despite that whole racial reconciliation thing, I love, like, that was like 5% of like, questionable, but the other 95 is amazing.
Wow. First of all, I love that, because that, like, in doing that, you're walking out the forgiveness that you want to see in the world. You're not just like writing a whole group of people off because of one thing that happened.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. The irony is, like, I wouldn't be so swift to forgive again if it wasn't for their teachings. Like, they emphasize rest, grace, Jesus, forgiveness a lot in other regards. I just think there's a bit of a blind spot when it comes to race, but we'll work on that. That's like for down the line. But our pastor really reminds us a lot about rest, and in fact had a sermon titled "It's Okay to Not Be Okay." And I think that really drove my inspiration for this song, was just knowing that a lifestyle of rest, a lifestyle of trusting God because you're resting, and not feeling that you have to micromanage every aspect of your life. Like, you don't have to push for everything. It's the way I approach the Sabbath on a bigger picture, if that makes sense. I do rest. I take a day out of the week to rest. Maybe I'm not the best at that every week, but I love that. But then there's also like the lifestyle of rest, in that you trust God, and you're not afraid of slowing down and relaxing. And maybe if you're going through a hard time, but also just trusting that if you follow what he tells you in the word, like, there's going to be peace, there's going to be calm. Like, and also success doesn't always look like $1 million in the bank and like 1,000 fans or whatever. Sometimes it's just being right where you are, and accepting that and loving that. So that's kind of what that song is about.
Oh, I love that. That really enriches my experience of listening to it.
Oh, yay. I love to hear that. Yay.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a sermon on rest given at my home church in Madison, Wisconsin years ago. This must have been 15, 20 years ago. And I have a recording of it still because it stood out to me so much. And it was brought up in that sermon that like if God's priority were for us to be super, super productive creatures, he would not have made us so that we need 8 hours out of every day to be like still in a bed, like doing nothing.
Yeah.
Like by force. And if we don't have that, we die. Like we need to have sleep.
Right.
And he wouldn't have commanded us to have one day out of the week where we do nothing. And he wouldn't have commanded us to, you know, in the Old Testament, have 1 year out of every 7 years, or we let the land rest and don't do anything. And it really paints a different picture of God. And of course, not everyone listening to this believes in God, and that's totally fine. But there's still some interesting lessons to apply. Like we are so limited in these areas, and to think that productivity is all that matters, like no matter what the life hackers are saying on Twitter about, like, you know, like maximize this or that or the other thing. We're really made for something more.
Exactly. Thank you for putting that into words. 100%. Yes, I concur.
So when you do take rest, do you take off from social media too? That's something that I wonder, because I have such a tortured relationship with social media. I deleted my Instagram about 1.5 years ago. It was probably around the time that you started your YouTube channel, actually. And since then I've loved it, because Instagram never came naturally to me. I might get back on there eventually. But Twitter has been more my thing. And that's, you know, that's whatever, it's a different medium. But I wonder what your relationship is like to social media and how you leverage that for your music stuff or art.
Yeah, I experimented with kind of deleting Instagram yesterday, actually. So I took,
oh my gosh,
I took Saturday off. I was inspired by you in a way. I took Saturday off completely, and I was like, I put my PS4 in my office for like the whole 6 days of the week, and then Saturday took it out and just was like in bed / playing games all day. So that was great. But I was still on Instagram. And so the next day I was like, okay, I'm going to delete this for a day and see how that goes. And it was so refreshing. And so I think I'm going to integrate that more, but more into the actual Sabbath day that I take off. But when it comes to social media as a whole, I was on Twitter since 2011 to 2021, so like 9 years, like early 2021.
Yeah, you deleted it like right after you messaged me, because
literally
I was like, King fan. I
was like, hey,
and I'm so glad you still had it, because otherwise I would have no idea about you. It was such an amazing thing.
Yeah, I'm really grateful at least like you were on Twitter, because I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to meet Alma, like you're amazing. And so I soon after that, which was May of 2021 maybe, or June, around then, I was fed up with the structure of Twitter. For a number of reasons. I feel like there's an illusion of discourse and conversation, but no one's really learning from one another. We're all just trying to one up each other with like a smarter, more viral statement or rebuttal. But I feel like no one's walking away saying, wow, I learned something and my mind was opened, or I'm more understanding of another perspective. We kind of get locked into our echo chamber and then think that we're like doing something effective in the world. But it's like, no, everyone's just thinking about themselves and how they can go viral, at least in my experience. So there's this Pareto principle, I believe it's called 80-20 rule, where I realized that it just wasn't one of those things where like the 20% was yielding like 80% of the results. It was just kind of like a waste of time. Whereas Instagram for me and YouTube, that's where like 80% of like my engagement occurred. And so it was more of just cutting the fat. With Twitter, also just maintaining my mental peace. Like I don't want to have an illusion of discourse. If we're talking, like let's talk, like let's really go deep in the DMs. Like it's not going to be performative for a crowd. Or let's email, or let's hop on a phone call or have lunch. but this whole like one-upping each other and like, oh, I'm dunking on your like perspective, was just too like middle school for me. I was like, you guys are not doing anything effective. So yeah, I ditched that, and it's been great. Do not miss it. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. So that's how I feel about Instagram and stuff. Well, not quite the same phenomenon. Instagram is obviously a totally different animal, but I'm really grateful to have the perspective because I didn't know why you quit exactly. I mean, I can imagine 100 reasons why Twitter is frustrating, but those are actually like really deep and substantive reasons that I didn't expect. And I respect that. So for me, Twitter, like when you talk about the Pareto, like the 80-20, Twitter is actually where like I've had the by far the most success and enjoyment from social media, whereas Instagram never came naturally. Like I'm not a photographer, I'm not a visual artist. I don't understand why I need to pretend that I can like take good photos because I can't. It's not, I'm like camera shy, like I don't do photo shoots. So like this pressure to like be an artist in this conventional way where I'm like posting selfies or these like inspirational quotes as a caption for this like hot photo of me doing something unrelated. Like it wore on my soul and I couldn't handle it. Whereas Twitter was like, I get what you mean about the illusion of discourse. I think I'm going to be paying attention to that because I really do think the magic happens in the DMs and the magic happens when people are intentionally like not in public. Why would the magic ever happen in public? Like when has that ever been a thing? I think that's like a law of physics almost.
Yeah.
Like people are best one-on-one and they're best in the quiet when no one's watching them. But yeah, I feel you. That's super great. That's super great. And I respect you. I'm also glad you didn't delete before you and I connected because that would have been a loss.
Yeah, that would have been sad. So yeah, I'm really glad.
Okay. Yay. So before we wrap up, I'm wondering, you've alluded to working quote unquote behind the scenes in the music industry, and I'm not going to force you to elaborate on that. You can if you would like, but I just wonder if you have advice for people, particularly maybe in the LA scene, although increasingly that doesn't matter because the world, the internet has opened up the music industry to everybody. If you have advice for other people in music trying to break through.
Great question. The first thing that comes to mind is this book, Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. It's this tiny like illustrated book. It literally looks like a square. It's like super small. And he talks about just showing your work, like putting it out there. In a way, this inspired me to put out my demo in 2020, like in the middle of like lockdowns and the pandemic. Or I had sat on like a few tracks for too long, and there were these Garageband demos, and I was like, they kind of sound okay if I just like slap some mastering on them. So I put them out there. The self-portrait EP.
Yeah. So all the ones that say demo, like the demo in parentheses songs, those are all GarageBand songs?
Yeah, dude.
What?
I put my audio production degree to work, girl.
You seriously did? Because I was like, oh yeah, I could see how these aren't like super hyper quality audio files, but I would not have thought that they were demo. Like when I hear demo, I think of like a voice memo or, a GarageBand file that's super, super. I mean, I know what my GarageBand demos look like and they're nothing like yours. Yours sound actually like pretty good for demo status.
I mean, I did do a lot of like, mixing on them, like a lot of like doubling, EQing, doing distortion. You can kind of hear that in there. And I will say, like, you can really push GarageBand if you're familiar with Logic Pro 10. So yeah, just play around. If anyone's listening and you have GarageBands, play around with the EQ a lot, like double your tracks and kind of like, make them thicker, because it's a really good program. But yeah, like show your work to any artist that wants to succeed. If you're in LA, I would say like it still kind of matters, like if you're in like those creative hubs like New York or LA, like don't be afraid to like compile stuff together, put out a website, merge your work with other things. I think that's important, to not just be an artist, just only a musical artist. Like follow with Alma. Like Alma does like crazy stuff with oil and braver angels and music, so that makes it like a fuller, like you're listening for more than just the track itself. You're like trying to learn more about these other worlds. Yeah, so don't be afraid to incorporate unique aspects of your story. Like I kind of infuse skateboarding in there, and other, my ethnicity and that sort of thing. Collaborate a lot. So don't only show your work, like collaborate a lot. Like don't be too proud to, reach out to a producer or someone else to do another verse. That's something I wish I did more when I was in college, was be less like in my own world and collaborate more. That looks really good to certain organizations. They look for collaborations and accrue a lot of credits, like get credits, put a lot of work out, don't hold back, don't wait for like 10 years till everything is perfect. And one more thing I would say is like, just don't be a jerk to anyone ever. Like whether that's a waiter or maybe some like a parking attendant, those things will like come back to you in ways that you don't expect. So don't just like suck up to like music execs and think that that's where your opportunity lies. Like be kind to everyone, even when you're not looking, because I've seen a lot of people just think that they can, get away with being a jerk, and then like somehow things come back to bite. So just be a nice person at 100% of the time. Okay, that's a bit of a weight. Like you don't have to be perfect, but be conscious of like, yeah, just don't be a jerk.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, and especially in an era where the music industry is so democratized, and you're not signed onto a label until you already have like 1 million fans anyway. Like right. You can't afford to lose those fans. Absolutely. To being a jerk. Like that's just not a good idea. You also can't afford to not have an Instagram probably, but what do I care?
I mean, at least you have a Twitter, I will say. Like at least you're engaged on a platform.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for Twitter. I'm still trying to figure that aspect of my life out, especially as I head into probably getting married this summer and maybe entering motherhood, or like these things that complicate your time. But so that was great advice. First of all, I wonder, so you mentioned collaboration, which often means like collaborating with another, like an equal, like me, for example. You can add me on your hook whenever you want, for the record. But I also think about like having a team. And when you're an audio production major, maybe you need a more limited team because you already have certain skill sets that the average singer-songwriter doesn't have. But do you have a team right now? Like, is there somebody that you go to for mastering, or do you use Lander, or what are the resources and the people that you're pulling from to make your work?
Yeah, I would say I do have a sort of, like a network / team that I reach out to. The last track I put out, Pain, was produced by Alex Bajos, who's really talented, multi-talented, multi-instrumentalist, and Argel Cota, who is another amazing, excellent, talented friend of mine. He plays the drums, he's very talented, but he's also like a multi-instrumentalist. So I worked with them. We also have another mastering connect. I believe he's in Mexico. He has like a mastering studio there. So I have a little bit of a team. There's also Luke and Simon of Chapters based out of deeper into the valley, like Calabasas area. They're really talented duo of producers, and they helped create my Water Games track and Fixer track. So yeah, I do have a bit of a team. Sometimes I will just put demos out by myself, but I can't just only have demos, so I work and collaborate with them. And yeah, I'm happy to really work with anyone, just as long as you're happy to work with me. Like, and you're not scared of the fact that I'm kind of a canceled character at this time, then I'm happy to collaborate.
Oh my gosh. Well, the invitation is open to anybody, and I'm so serious. If you need somebody to sing a hook, you already know. You already know, girl. I'll do it. It's gonna happen. Yes. So where, besides getting nagged by me all the time to put more music out, what is your primary focus right now artistically? Are you mostly focused on the visual art side, or like, let's say 6 months from now, how do you want to be spending your time artistically?
Artistically, that's a great question. I think I'm definitely going to follow your advice. To anyone who doesn't know, like Alma, yes, she really has been pushing me and inspiring me a lot to put out more music. So like I'm going to make more intentional days for writing, whether that's writing for myself or ghost writing for some other artists. We'll see how that plays out. And but for the time being, for like literally the next 2 months, I'm going to be kind of following up on some visual art projects, and then maybe summertime there'll be some music. Who knows? We'll see.
Hey,
What about
I
you?
hope
What
so.
about you?
Okay, so actually just yesterday I finished comping vocals for the last song that I need to finish my album.
Yes.
I'm thinking about writing a blog post about why it's taken me freaking 8 years to put out a new album. And it's not even like an inspirational, like, oh, so this is what I learned thing. It's really just a confessional. Like, this is my personal flaw. And like, these are all the things that held me up for no reason. And I shouldn't have let them hold me up. But yeah, there's this one song has been like the final track that still needs a vocal stem. If you don't know what that is, it's just like the pure vocals, no instrumental, no anything, and you submit the stem along with the rest of the stems for like bass and guitar and piano. You of course know this, Kimi, but other people might not. And then you mix that and you take that into the mixing studio and then ultimately the mastering studio. So I've been working on finalizing the vocal stems for this one song that's just been so hard to sing. And my hope and prayer and dare I say promise to everyone is that I am finishing this one song, and then after that it's off to the races and we're actually heading into mixing for my next album.
Yay!
Like I've been sitting on it for so many years now, like that's practically awesome. Finished. Yeah. Thank you. I need it. I need people like you around to like just keep me inspired and remind me that you can be a real human being and be in the music industry and not be a jerk and have like a good social media presence that isn't gimmicky and annoying and you don't have to all believe the same thing too. You can have different sorts of beliefs on all sorts of matters.
Exactly.
And on that note, I wonder, Kimi, my final question to you before I ask you to just share your socials and tell everyone where to find you is I'm wondering what you want to be known for as a person, whether it's artistically or otherwise. Do you even want to be known? I don't know. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just want to hide in your room all day. But whether it's YouTube or essay commentary or art or music, what do you see for yourself in that area?
I would want to be, known for empowering, like my heart is really for empowering young girls in developing countries, whether that's like with actual resources or emotionally or spiritually. I always, I'm from Uganda. That's my ethnicity, that's my culture and my home. And, I could have been the person if it wasn't for just God's grace and certain alignments and just the way life panned out, I could have been that girl who doesn't have any, resources or opportunities or doesn't even believe that that's possible just because of where they are geographically. So I want to be known for uplifting, 50,000 to 100,000 young girls in Africa and Uganda. That's been my heart for a long time. And I hope that someday that will sort of be fulfilled.
That's a lot better than being known for hot takes on Twitter. So I love it. I love it. And I'm not at all surprised because that seems so up your alley. And I'm excited to see it come to fruition. So where do you want people to follow you? What's the best social media or website or reference for people who are curious about your work?
Best place would be honestly, that's a good question. Best place, I'd say subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com. This is my old artist name /Nyunozi music. I'll type it out and send it to you. And
I'll put it in the notes.
Just to spell it out to anyone who's listening, NYONYOZI music. or you could type Kimi Katiti, Katiti into the search bar, and some of my videos should pop up. I'd say that's the best place. And then the second best place would be Instagram. So I am Kimi Katiti, just at Kimi Katiti, KIMIKATITI. And I'm always happy to connect there. If you want to email me or have any specific kind of inquiries, info@kimikatiti.com is where you can find me.
Wonderful. And kimikatiti.com has all sorts of information about, I think it has some of your art. Your art is up there.
Yes.
Maybe your music is linked as well. At least your
That's
Spotify is linked from there as well. And
yes.
I found it just kind of a nice little oasis on the internet myself.
Oh, thanks! I need to work on it, but I really appreciate that.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kimi. I'm so glad that we got to talk, and I'm excited to share your music and your person with the world going forward.
Thank you so much for having me, Alma. This was great.
My will, this chase I could